It's 7:38 in the morning, Pacific time. My name is Sarah Chain, and I have just woken up. I'm a coordination manager at Walmart in the supply chain department. During the night, 150 of my agents have worked really hard, and as I wake up, I speak to my coordination agent that gives me a recap of the work that has been done during the night. 150 decisions have been coordinated very well. One of my agents has just finished a super complex negotiation and has allowed me to save, and has allowed my organization, Walmart, to save a couple of millions of dollars. One of the other agents in logistics has just reimagined the route. Instead of going from China to the US, has found a way to have a much more complex route, dividing it in between 5 and 8 routes to make supply chain more efficient. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the orchestration economics, the new rules of value in the agentic era. In my example, Walmart has saved 2% of their supply chain costs through agentic and through orchestration, and this is what we are going to unfold during this speech. We are going to talk about the paradigm that we are in, the new agentic AI paradigm. We are going to talk about the distinction between AI agents and agentic AI systems, which is extremely different. We will talk about where we are in the technology as of today, look at the rules of value that are being built, and understand how we can build durable growth modes in this new era. So before I start discussing what are AI agents and agentic AI, let me start with a fundamental concept, which is the one of discontinuity. Discontinuity has become my favorite word over the last 3 years, and is how I characterize what is happening with this technology. Think about the distinction. We used to think about disruption, and disruption is a well-known word. But discontinuity is extremely different. When you think about a growth curve and disruption comes along, that growth curve will follow its direction and will change by maybe plus 5%, minus 5%, plus 10%, etc. But the growth curve is continuing in a direction that is well known, that could be quicker or not, but it's something that we know and that we can apprehend. When discontinuity comes along, that growth curve completely stops. And we start with a new growth curve that could be the same, but that could be completely different. So we have to reimagine what is happening. Discontinuity is a term from geology. When discontinuity happens in geology, you have two rocks that collide together, and in 95% of cases, the rock will break. But in 5% of the cases, because of the tensile strength, that rock, that new ensemble, becomes much stronger and solid. This is what discontinuity is about. It's about changing the growth curves, the profile and the speed that we are accustomed to within our organizations and within our known boundaries, and getting into something that is new, that in many cases could prove to be much more solid, viable, and creative of more value. Now with agentic AI, we go one step further in this new discontinuity. Here we enter what I call a paradigm, to take the definition of Thomas Kuhn that he coined in The Theory of Scientific Revolutions, which is things are messy, not well known before the paradigm starts, and then all of a sudden we realize that we are into something new. And what is that about? In the case of agentic AI, the paradigm that we are in today is humans, you and I, are taking actions. In an agentic AI paradigm, we move to a system of actions where it's computer systems that are going to take these actions. I have not said that there is not a human. I have said that the person that is taking the action at the core is a computer system, which is fundamentally units of inference when you think about it. This is the paradigm change that we are in, and this is what it is about. Now that we have said that, let's get into the definition of what are AI agents and what are agentic AI systems, because the distinction matters. So, let me give you my favorite definition of what is an AI agent. Taking my notes because I want to give you the right definition. Right. So, okay? So, an agent is a system that runs tools in a loop to produce an action. An agent is a system that runs tools in a loop to produce an action. I could have added to produce an action for a user, but I have not added that because in an agentic chain, if you take my example of Sarah chain, who is the logistics manager, you have multiple agents in the chain, and so one of the agents can be taking an action for another one of the agents. So let's stick with the first definition, which is you're running tools in a loop, so you're going back and forth with the LLM. Claude is making an action, sending it back to Claude, etc., to produce a decision. We go back to the system of action, okay? This is what an agent is about. Now, an agentic AI system is much more sophisticated than an individual AI agent. Imagine that we are all virtual colleagues in this room. We are all individual agents sitting at our table. An agentic AI system is going to require that we work together, that when I'm speaking, you are not speaking, that when somebody is waving hands, we will look at the person waving hands. That is what an agentic AI system is about. It is much more complicated, and it is of a strong architectural complexity. We are today in the process of building agentic AI systems, and we have only started that since, I would say, last November, so only 1 year ago, when Anthropic, one of the leading LLM providers, launched the MCP, the Model Context Protocol, that allowed agents to access context and to actually have the information to ground their decisions, without which an agent will not be smart. In April this year, Google launched the agent-to-agent protocol. Now, this enables agents to speak together. So we go back to my example of we're all in this room becoming agents. We are now able not only to ground our decisions, but we're able to speak to each other. This is from April. In September, Google launched, also as an open source way, the agent-to-payment system, which is the core enabler of agentic commerce and that should have very widespread developments. This is what agentic AI systems are about. They are fundamentally complicated architectural points that are just in the beginning of their capabilities. So today, multi-agent systems are not a reality. Multi-agent systems are a possibility that will be unfolded over the next 10 years, and we will go back on that. To go back to my definition of agents, and it's one of the things that was pointed out in the introduction, an AI agent, if you take my definition, is not a replacement of a human. Why? Because AI agents do not have agency. Now remember, in 1979, IBM had a very famous training slide in which they said, computers cannot be held responsible. That is why a computer will never take a management decision. We are in that phase right now. An agent can do a lot of things, an agentic AI system can do a lot of things, but they cannot do, and probably never will be able to do, what we as humans can do with agency. I'm the biggest believer in agentic AI systems. What I am saying here is that we need to be wary of what is possible and what is not possible yet and over the next years to actually grasp the reality of the technology and make the right decisions that result from that. Okay, where are we from a technological point of view into the build-out of these agentic AI systems? First, we have the LLMs. The LLMs have made tremendous progress over the last months, and we are now reaching a point where the state-of-the-art models, GPT-5, Claude, Sonnet 4.5, etc., have reached capabilities that actually allow to do a lot of things. They're not intelligent yet. I actually do not care whether we reach AGI or not, which for me is not at all the point of this discussion and is to a large extent a marketing item. Even if we stop everything and we don't have AGI, we can do a lot of things already today, for sure. So what is more interesting with LLMs is that they are starting to display emergent behaviors of coordination. This is a paper that dates back from October 5th and that I found striking and that I want to share with you. When LLMs were put together, like LLMs, Claude, GPT-5, etc., they started to display collaborative behavior. This is a striking advancement that is extremely positive for what is happening in agentic systems. In other words, LLMs are moving from individual components to building blocks of agentic AI systems, and we are just scratching the surface on this. Then we have the protocols. We discussed the protocols, the A2A, A2P, etc. That is progressing. There's a ton of research on that, and again, we are also here just scratching the surface. Will those be open source protocols? Will it be closed? There are many answers that are yet to be brought, but I would say in that phase, progress is happening very quickly. The orchestration mesh, which is the ensemble in which these LLMs compose, are governed and make the right decisions, and on which you build your agents on top, there has been a lot of progress on that also. Google has launched Vertex AI, which is giving a lot of satisfaction and delivering good results. Microsoft introduced lots of things also and merged two of their agentic frameworks earlier, in the last months actually. And Amazon is catching up also with their system. So I'm not worried on that phase. From a database perspective, we are nowhere. From a database perspective, agentic AI systems are not working today. When agents query a database, we have a phenomenon that professors from UC Berkeley called agentic speculation. In other words, your agent goes in your database and queries again and again in a very non-efficient way. And not only is it not efficient from a compute standpoint, but it doesn't actually render the right decision. So we are progressing fast, but you understand we are not there, which is why I would only agree with Andrew Karpathy, who says this is the decade of agents. And do not believe in any marketing slogans that say that the world is going to change overnight and that we are already in multi-agent systems. We are not, and we do not even have the frameworks to say which is a good or a bad decision in an agentic system. It doesn't matter. Let's assume that this will be working and that we are progressing in that direction. In this context, how do we build a company that is in the right position within this chain? My fundamental conviction here is that in an agentic AI paradigm, the value will accrue to what I call the orchestrator. The orchestrator is the conductor of the orchestra. It is the person that decides which music to play, with which musicians, in which tone, to deliver what satisfaction to their audience. It doesn't mean that there is no value in all the musicians. It's actually the contrary. There's a ton of value across all the musicians. But in any case, the conductor of the orchestra is the one who is grasping everything and who captures the value. It is estimated that in agentic chains, the orchestrator will capture as much as 50% of the value. The LLMs will get a component, and the sub-agents in the chain will get between 15 and 20%. There's emerging research on agents, on multi-agent systems that are giving those numbers. Again, this is all very preliminary. So if we believe that you need to be the orchestrator, you need to be the conductor of the orchestra, then what makes you that conductor and what gives you the right to be the one deciding what music you are playing and with whom? Well, I have defined 3 rules of value. The first rule is access to user context, proximity to user intent. What does that mean? I want to be the person as the company that is going to receive what the user wants. Make that happen. Play that music, etc., etc. You want to be the person or the company that is the closest possible to the user and that is receiving the user intent. You do not want to be one of the musicians in the chain that is at the very back of the orchestra and that is not sitting close to the public. Again, you will still be capturing value, but you will be capturing much less value than the actual orchestrator. Which is why when Salesforce blocked access to Slack a couple of months ago, this was not a defensive move. This was, in my view, a very genius move by Mark Benioff that knew at that time, even though things were not stabilized, that Slack was actually Salesforce's biggest moat. Because you express business intent in Slack. You do not express business intent in Tableau or in a CRM. So if you believe in that evolution, what they announced recently is very smart. Of course, this will depend on execution, which is a completely separate question that I'm not addressing here. So rule number 1, you want to be close to user intent. That is just rule number 1. Rule number 2, you need to have access to context. An agent without context is like a body without a brain. It's going in every direction, looking bad, and not making the right decisions. So your agent needs to be grounded in context. Now, context is not data, and it is absolutely wrong what everyone is saying, which is extremely basic and is not suitable for this audience, which is data is not sufficient in an agentic world. Data is a part of context. What is context? Context, first and foremost, is a complex memory system to be able to retrieve, to be able to access the right decisions and understand what decisions you should actually be making and how you inform them. You need to have structured memory that allows you to fetch that information. You need to have episodic memory, semantic memory, short-term memory, long-term memory. That is costly and that is complex from an architectural standpoint. Then you actually need to have context, and that context should not just be static data, it should be the right knowledge graph, it should be execution data, it should be something that is extremely profound that enables you to know exactly how to make that decision. So context surpasses data and requires the memory systems. And last, that context should be defensible. In a world where data is increasingly portable and where that will be the norm, both in consumer and enterprise with the accessibility made possible by the different protocols, you need to be able to have unique data. And in the agentic world, companies that have physical and digital modes will be, in my view, the best positioned companies. So companies that were seen as capex heavy, boring, and not liked by Wall Street because of their heavy capex could actually be companies that transform all of their physical assets into agentic nodes capable of capturing in real-time data that no other company can capture. And here you have a whole new value that is being created. This is what rule number 2 is about, having defensible context structured in complex layered memory systems. Then your data becomes actually valuable. And last, rule number 3, you should be able to coordinate the workflows that actually allow to make that decision. If you go back to the definition of what is an agent, you're fetching tools in a loop to produce an outcome. you need to understand very precisely what is that outcome. How do I make a decision? What does good look like? You need to understand that to then be able to go back to your agentic chain, like a management decision, and coordinate all of the actions within that chain in a way that will give satisfaction. So if you know nothing about the process or the workflow in my example, you cannot be the orchestrator of that specific workflow, and you can only be one of the agents in the chain. Those three conditions are what allows a company to be positioned correctly in this new world, and that command what I call orchestration economics. And we go here into what will be the last part of my speech on orchestration economics. I have given you a view of where we are in agentic AI versus AI agents, what is possible, what is not, and how do you capture value. How does that actually translate into value that you can prove and show to your investors or to Wall Street? Because this is a problem of educating the public markets to understanding the new rules of value and what does a defensible company look like in the agentic era. And this is something very new that is very interesting. So a company that is an orchestrator first will be a company that will still be alive. This seems very easy, but it's critical, because in the three laws of values that I have not described, it's the first one, that is rule 0 in some way, is you should not be bypassed in the agentic world. You should have the rights and the opportunity to play that music. But if the room is closed and there is no more audience, it doesn't matter that you can actually be the conductor of the orchestra if no one wants to listen to your music because it's a new format, because your music is not the right one. And it is maybe a source of amusement, but I can tell you that a lot of companies will not be allowed to play that music. Why? Because if you're, for example, a software company who will be completely bypassed by agents because agents will not need you, agents will not need to fetch a CRM, agents will not need to make digital marketing in this way, and I will not give examples to frustrate anyone, but there are many cases in which you become irrelevant in an agentic world. So I'm putting those companies aside, and hopefully they understand that because the laws of values are changing, that is the first criteria that you want to address. Then only do you start thinking about, okay, how do I create value in this world? So this is the hypothesis that I am working on. Now, what does this company look like? Well, first, an agentic AI company will have a strongly enhanced margin profile. Over the last years, the forward price-to-earnings ratio of the S&P has gone from 15x to 22x. And there are debates of whether we are in a bubble, etc., that I will not address here. In the meantime, while this ratio was going from 15 to 22x, what no one is saying is that the operating margin went from 7 to 15%, doubled. So there is a reason. Not everyone is crazy, and there's actually a fundamental anchor in why this P ratio has gone up across the S&P 500. I profoundly think that with the productivity gains that can be implemented within internal agentic AI, so not even customer facing, just reorganizing your operations to gain productivity and putting aside or more integrating the more expensive R&D investments and COGS, because your margin profile of the agentic AI company will not have the same margins on that. You will have more R&D expenses, and your COGS will be more important. If not, you're not an agentic AI company, you're just a regular company. So putting that aside, it is reasonable to expect a 7 to 8% increase in operating margin. That gets us north of 20%. And if we follow the same trend, and again, I do not have a crystal ball, so I don't know, but it would not be unreasonable to my mind to have an P ratio that approximates around 30 times, which is the P ratio of a tech company. In other words, a real-world company, if it is able to capture the margin gains on internal orchestration, could reach higher forward P ratios, could be valued more, not because of magic, but because your margin profile will be enhanced. But that was just the starter course. The main course is orchestration economics, in the sense that agentic AI will help you create new revenue lines that are of higher margin and that correspond to the work being produced by the synthetic colleagues that I have described, which are units of inference. Let me explain. In the agentic world, you will be able to solve business problems for your clients and capture revenue from that. Going back to my example of Sarah Chain, okay? She's the coordination manager at Walmart. She is supervising in today's world, not in the world that I described, but in today's world, tens of people that are coordinating logistics that are having to deal with there was a snowstorm and there's a Trump tariffs, etc. And so it is costing people's time, cost to reroute packages, to have all these people working for her. If you have a transportation company, whomever will seize that first, who is able to actually solve that problem because they plug into the systems of Walmart and they anticipate the transport needs and all like the dislocation, well, that actor will be able to capture a share of the outcome that is the cost savings made at Walmart. In my example, estimated to 2% of Walmart savings, which is a ton of money. And I could unfold hundreds of examples in that. How in an agentic AI system do you solve for your customer's problem because of your ability to, again, coordinate workflows that you only know and do best, and because you have the right context? That is how you capture new revenue lines. And those revenue lines are going to be the ones that are going to capture value in the agentic economy, and that will come on top of enhanced operating margins that I have just discussed. So in orchestration economics, we have a fundamentally redesigned P&L. We have something new, something that is more resilient, and that surpasses what we have seen in previous tech revolutions. We are not there yet, and again, the route is very long. It will take 10 years. I don't know if it will take 10 years. It will take maybe 2 years. Maybe it will take 10 years. Things will happen, but I do not have a crystal ball. But what I know for sure is that you want to be the front runner in what is happening, and you need to reimagine now what your company can look like. And agentic AI is not about transformation. It's about the translation of your existing modes in today's paradigm, your data, your workflows, your customers, and it's about doing a mathematical translation of those strengths, the knowledge of the weaknesses, and reimagining what your company looks like in this new paradigm. And being a front runner in that, because if you're not doing that, your competitors hopefully will also have the same ideas. That's what we all hope for. In a nutshell, we are not there, but I could only strongly encourage you to think about this future, to grasp the extremely rapid technological advances that are unfolding day after day, week after week, and to position your company on that side and to be creative around what is the value that is at stake and how do you redefine that correctly. Welcome to the orchestration economy.